Continuing our discussion of M-Government security, at this point we want to look at the changes you can expect to your network and application architecture as we transition to mobile. We want to look at these changes. We want to expose the idea of attack surfaces, which we will examine in more detail later, and show you the differences in the high-level architecture with mobile applications. So this is a depiction of a general multi-tier or N-tier application architecture with the client represented by the gentleman operating his computer, talking over the internet into an application running in the data center. The front end will be a web server of some sort, presenting the presentation layer, talking to one or more layers of business logic and application servers before we actually end up at the ultimate back end where the bits are actually stored in some sort of a database. So in this particular representation, the attack surface is represented by the physical boundary of the data center. Think of attack surface as if I were to ask you to attack something like a basketball. How could you get to the interior? There's only one port where you insert the needle to inflate the ball. So the surface is represented by the surface of the ball and that one entry point. Correspondingly here, the surface are the walls and boundaries of the data center and the logical entry point of the network connection. Now, moving to a mobile architecture, things change a bit. Now we have the client with a handheld device. So the front end, if you will, has moved from the data center out to the mobile, and the back end changes. My attack surface has moved and shifted and now represents the entire data center, the communications out to the client, and now the code running on the client itself. The mobile application in the handheld is now attackable, and this changes things. So we use the terms front end and back end throughout this course, but let's examine what we really think about and what we're talking about here. So from an application developer's point of view, the front end with mobile computing represents the application running on the handheld, and the back end is the data center, that which the mobile application communicates with. But from the data center perspective, from the operator's perspective, or the web application developer, the front end is still in the data center itself, and the back end is further back, representing the compute and data storage. So what's important is that we use these terms clearly, and when application developers and systems and network people talk together and use the term front end and back end, they need to be explicit and mention the context so that we are all referring to the same component. Now, native applications on the mobile platform address the limitations of moving the application from its web-based origins strictly out onto the handheld. I can use a handheld to access a mobile or a web-based application, but a native application offers much more rich experience. Unfortunately, it's also subject to the normal application security vulnerabilities. For example, the OWASP, Open Web Application Security Project, Top 10 vulnerabilities. And we have new vulnerabilities which are introduced on the basis of it being mobile. Mobile devices are easily lost and stolen. They don't have secure storage. And there is emergent behavior we have to deal with. No one can predict what the new features of a handheld will be when the manufacturers introduce their new models. And we have seen things like near-field communications, SMS, multimedia messaging, GPS, and other devices introduced into handhelds that were not predicted. We don't know what our users are going to do with these devices. In fact, I can predict one thing with certainty. Your users will find out something new and different to do with your device that you didn't anticipate. And finally, privacy. This is what we refer to in the security industry as the third rail. So consider my example of a streetcar or a train. It rides on two rails, one for the left wheel, one for the right wheel. But there is a third rail which supplies the electrical power. If you touch the third rail, bad things happen to you. If you violate your user's privacy, bad things happen to you. And one thing is certain, once private information is released, it can't be recovered, it's no longer private. So this is a representation of what we are going to be dealing with in the mobile application world. You can see we have multiple client operating systems, here Android, iOS, and the BlackBerry, talking through a security token service to our multiple tiered application on the back end. And remember, we switch from carrier to carrier as the devices move. It will seamlessly hop or roam from one network to another, and perhaps move from GSM to Wi-Fi as you come into a building. Everything in the middle needs to be designed to handle those transitions and to do it securely. Thank you.